Between Me and You. Patrick Fyffe in character, today as Freddie-Earl of Camperdown in Sarah's Limb.
Ah, that's better. Alone at last. Birthday parties are all very well, but when you get to my age, you need a few minutes on your own to recharge the batteries, which is why I have escaped in here to top up with the aid of a drop of the old Methuselah. It's me 83rd, you know. Not bad. We're long livers in our family. Father made 90. He'd have made 91 if he hadn't fallen out of the window trying to save his cockatoo. I must say, Mrs. Saddleworth put on a jolly good spread, mostly with the grandchildren in mind, of course. I'm not a great one for jellies, but the youngsters love them. We'll have the real food later, when they're all safely tucked up in bed, be a bit quieter then. I have to admit, the screaming does grate rather. Mind, I can't blame Lavinia for that sudden outburst of hysteria. I mean, it can't be very nice to wake from a siesta and find you can't move from your chair, and then when you do, you find that you've left half your dress on it. It baffles me where Tancred found that staple gun. Still is only 5. Wasn't much better myself at that age. In fact, I can recall one incident that was not so dissimilar. I was 6, I think. That was a party. No, not a birthday party. A tea party. And no ordinary tea party, I might add. Now, in those days, our cook here at Camperdown Place was a Mrs. Tugunta, excellent cook, devoted to the family. And one of my great delights was to sneak down to her kitchen whenever I could. Fascination of below-stairs life, you understand. And on that particular occasion to which I refer, I remember as I made my entrance, as usual, via the dumbwaiter, I was greeted with the words, "Don't bother me today, Master Freddie, if you don't mind. We have a very important guest coming to tea, and I'm in a bit of a fluster." Well, this was most unlike Mrs. Tugunta. I could only deduce, in my innocence, that our guest must be someone of extraordinary importance. Well, naturally, I offered Mrs. Tugunta my assistance. I was only 6, but this was clearly an occasion of all hands to the pump. "I think not, Master Freddie, but thank you all the same." Now, she must have seen the disappointment on my face, maybe even a tear in the eye, I can't remember, though perhaps not. I wasn't given to tears very easily. "I tell you what," she said, "you can go and collect some raspberries for me. Her ladyship wants me to make some of my Jubilee Viennese raspberry tartlets. How's that?" I was overjoyed, of course. Whereupon she gave me a large colander and pointed me in the direction of the kitchen garden with the words, "Bring that back full to the brim and mind you don't eat any. They'll give you a tummy ache." Who was coming to tea, I wondered, as I made my way through the wooden gate into the kitchen garden. Although I was only 6 years old, as I say, I had already learned that these delicacies were only ever made for very special guests. The thought preoccupied me. Who might qualify for Mrs. Tugunta's Viennese raspberry tartlets? Then I had it. Came to me in a flash, was it? The King and Queen! Of course it must be the King and Queen. And with that thought in mind, I began to select only the biggest and the best fruits, and only eating every other one I picked. I'd been at my task for some several hours, or so I thought, probably only a couple of minutes, when this face appeared through the netting. Startled me, I can tell you. It was Brightling, the head gardener. "Caught you, young fellow, my lad," he said, red-handed. That bit was true, because I was covered in juice, you see. He was clearly about to remonstrate with me, so I pulled myself up to my full height, which meant I was about level with his knee, and I said, in what I hoped was a passable imitation of Papa, "Pardon me, Brightling, but I am on an important mission for Mrs. Tugunta. She has sent me to pick these raspberries because the King and Queen are coming to tea. Oh, yes, he said. And they're bringing the Prime Minister as well, are they? Now, that thought hadn't occurred to me, so I had to think quickly. And I told him that it was hoped that the Prime Minister would attend if he wasn't already going to tea somewhere else. That seemed to satisfy him, and he set about helping me pick the fruit. Of course, I was still eating every other one. You want to stop that, young sir, he said, give you tummy ache. I know, I said, Mrs. Dragunta told me, but I never get tummy ache. Could be even worse, he said, your leg could drop off. Oh, don't be silly, I said. Whoever heard of someone losing their leg through eating raspberries? Oh, I've known it happen, said old Brightling. His ghastly warning made me think, I can tell you. Stuck in my mind as I made my way back to the kitchen where Mrs. Dragunta was waiting to receive the rich pickings. Well done, Master Freddie, you've really excelled yourself today. Whereupon she took the biggest and juiciest raspberry from the top of the pile and presented it to me. No, thank you, I said. I'd better not. My leg might drop off. Lunch in the nursery that day was a little haphazard, I remember. My governess, Maîtresse Coulthard, took scant notice of me, and it was only when I asked her if she knew who was coming to tea that with one hand to her breast and the other holding a knife aloft, as though she were Boadicea marshalling her tribesmen, she declaimed, "Only the divine Sarah, mon cher Freddie, the greatest living legend of our time." At which she brought her knife down in emphasis of her statement, smiting the butter dish and sending several pats scudding across the table. Apart from finding her actions a little more eccentric than usual, I was somewhat disappointed to hear no mention of the King and Queen, as by now, you see, I'd more or less convinced myself that it was they who were coming to tea. Instead of which, it was to be a legend called Sarah, but not only a legend, but a divine one to boot. After lunch, Maîtresse Coulthard proceeded to dress me in my dreaded sailor suit, a mandatory outfit for special occasions. Most disagreeable, that sailor suit. Never liked wearing it. However, when she was satisfied, I was then led along to Mamma's boudoir for a further inspection. It was during this inspection that we heard the sound of the first carriage arriving. Well, Mamma dashed downstairs to join Mamma to receive our guests, whilst I seized the opportunity to run out onto the balcony to catch a glimpse of our guests. The gentlemen in formal dress, wearing medals and sashes, the ladies arrayed in all their finery, bedecked with jewels. It was a glittering cavalcade, I can tell you. After all, you must remember, I am speaking of the days long gone when everyone dressed for whatever the occasion, even a tea party, and this, clearly, as I have said, was no ordinary tea party. Still no sign of our very important guest. Indeed, I was thinking that perhaps my governess must have been mistaken, when at the far end of the drive this strange coach came into view, drawn by two snow-white horses with high-waving plumes. It turned onto the terrace, then circled the great lawn, before finally coming to rest beneath the window. Whereupon, Maîtresse Coulthard raised both arms in the air and shouted, "Vive la France!" and hurried from the room. So expressive, the grin. My sister now joined me on the balcony, leaned forward to see who our great visitor was, and like myself was a little taken aback by the vision in the coach below. A tiny, hunched-up figure, swathed in what appeared to be yards and yards of silk and lace drapery, pale face barely visible, but a profusion of red curls, very tight to her forehead, gave her at first sight the appearance of dear old Queen Alexandra. Could it be her after all, I wondered? As we took in the scene, two footmen came forward and let down the steps from the carriage. One of the footmen stepped into the carriage, removed the rug that covered her knees, and lifted the lady up in his arms, whilst the other guided him on to terra firma. My sister let out a cry. "Did you see that, Freddie?" What, I said. She's only got one leg. You can imagine the effect it had on me. My very first thought, raspberries, I thought. She's been eating too many raspberries. My second thought, the table of raspberry tartlets downstairs. We took our seats in the music room that had been arranged in the style of a small theatre. Family up at the front, of course. And I distinctly remember the hushed atmosphere as the great lady was carried in and placed on a gilt chair on a raised dais, facing her expectant audience. In her hand she held a white camellia. My father, very slowly, eased himself out of his chair, turned to face the assembly and announced, Madame Sarah Bernhardt will commence her dramatic recital with 2 speeches from Adrienne Lecouvreur. And he promptly sat down again. I remember little of the great lady's performance. My mind was elsewhere, you see. I was preoccupied with one single thought, how to prevent her from eating the raspberry tartlets, and thus preserving her one sound leg. This I must do at whatever the cost. Strange, isn't it, how in times of crisis, when immediate decisions are called for, that one so often takes the right course of action. And so it was that day. Following Madame Bernhardt's rapturous reception, the assembled company had no sooner adjourned to take tea on the terrace when I knew what I must do. Dashing out through the French windows, I ran towards the table upon which the maids had placed the tartlets, along with other assorted patisserie. I leapt up onto the table, and I proceeded to jump up and down on the offending confectionery. And to make doubly sure that the tartlets would be inedible, I then flung myself full length onto their scattered remains. Well, you can perhaps imagine the furore that followed. I do not recall seeing Madame Bernhardt leave, though I understand she was immediately escorted back to her carriage in a state of some agitation, apparently muttering, "Bring back the guillotine." As for me, Maîtresse Coulthard was summoned, and I was whisked away from the scene of devastation and locked in my room. Ma and Papa were terribly angry, I remember, but of course they didn't understand, you see, particularly my apparent lack of remorse for what I'd done. After all, I had saved it. I had saved Madame Bernhardt's remaining leg. Why should I feel remorse? Yes, the simple logic of an innocent 6-year-old. I do recall, however, the incident had one particular, if unexpected, bonus for me, at least. I never had to wear the damn sailor suit again. Couldn't get the raspberry stains out of it, you see. Ah, well, should be back to the party, I suppose, though I doubt if they've really missed me. And I must inquire about Lavinia. Happy birthday, Freddie, well, so-and-so.
That was Sarah's Limb, written and presented by Patrick Fyffe, in character today as Freddie, Earl of Camperdown. Between Me and You was produced by John Fawcett Wilson.
The theme music for Between Me and You was written and played by Max Harris.